She gave this tight little smile when she said it. Go ahead. Leave. I give you a week before you come crawling back for my money. No yelling. No shaking. Just that smile. We were in the kitchen. The lights above the island hummed low, like they always did at night. The marble countertop felt cold through my palms. She'd wiped it down not long before. Smelled like lemon cleaner and something floral underneath. Her perfume, probably. I packed one bag. Didn't rush. Didn't drag it out either. I folded jeans the way my dad taught me, flat, tight, efficient. Rolled socks into each other. Grabbed 2 work shirts, 3 t-shirts, shaving kit. I almost packed my heavy boots, but left them. Came back for them a minute later. Day 4. She called me 47 times. 47. I checked the call log twice to be sure I wasn't exaggerating. I'm Uncle Mickle. I'm not a loud man. Never have been. I talk steady. Work steady. If something breaks, I fix it. If something wobbles, I brace it. That's how I've lived most of my life. I don't walk out easy. But I don't stay where I measured either. The house echoed that night. You ever notice how big houses do that? Sound travels farther than it should. Every word lingers a second too long in the air. Her father bought that place years back. Or built it, no, bought it. Bought it outright after selling off some medical supply company. I never kept the timeline straight. Money moved in her world like it had its own gravity. In mine, it moved when you moved. My dad drove a truck for 32 years. Same route. Same thermos, with a dent on the side. The carpet in our house flattened where we walked and stayed fluffy in the corners. You could see life mapped into it. In her house, nothing showed where. Not even arguments. I remember looking at her after she said that line. She wasn't flushed. Wasn't pacing. She leaned back against the island, phone in one hand, thumb hovering like she might scroll while waiting for my reaction. Like this was predictable. I said, okay. That's it. No speech about pride. No list of sacrifices. I didn't even raise my eyebrows. I just said it plain. And for a second, I mean a real second, I thought she'd laugh and say, I'm kidding. Or at least soften. Step forward. Touch my arm. Something. She didn't. I walked upstairs. The bedroom was neat. Bedspread tight. Her jewelry tray lined up precise on the dresser. That soft lamp glow on her side of the bed. I grabbed my duffel from a closet shelf and shook the dust off it. As I was packing, I did pause once. Shirt halfway folded. I remember thinking, maybe this is just heat talking. People say things when they're cornered. I've said some sharp things before, but this didn't feel sharp. It felt calculated, and that bothered me more. When I zipped the bag, I stood still a moment. The house felt too quiet. I expected footsteps on the stairs, or her voice calling up, Mickle, don't be ridiculous. Nothing. I walked down with the bag in my right hand. She didn't look up immediately. Just said, you'll be back. Confident. Calm. I can still hear the way her voice didn't crack. The front door closed heavy behind me. Solid wood. Soft seal. No slam. It shut like it was designed to keep weather out. Or people. The driveway was long gravel. My truck tires made that crunching sound, louder than usual in the dark. For a moment I wondered if I was proving her point. Pride can cost more than rent. I sat in the driver's seat with the engine idling. Hands on the wheel. The dashboard lights cast that dull green glow over everything. I thought about turning it off. Walking back in. Saying fine. We'll talk. But I didn't move. Something inside me had gone still. Not angry. Not even hurt. Just quiet. That's what scared me a little. Because when I get loud, it passes. When I get quiet, things change. Day 1 wasn't hard. I stayed at a small extended stay place off the highway. Carpet smelled faintly like old smoke, even though the sign said non-smoking. The air conditioner rattled when it kicked on. Bed dipped slightly in the middle. I slept fine. Day 2, I worked my shift like normal. Didn't tell anyone anything. Ate lunch in my truck. Ham sandwich. Gas station coffee. Checked my phone once. No missed calls. Day 3 felt longer. I kept thinking about that smile. Not cruel. Not exactly. Just certain. That's the word. Certain I'd calculate my way back. Day 4. My phone started lighting up around 7:12 p.m. I remember because I just pulled into the motel lot and the sun was still sitting low over the highway sign. Call after call. Buzz, buzz, buzz. 47 times before midnight. No voicemail at first. Just missed calls stacking up like something urgent was burning. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to punish her. I just needed to understand something first. Was she calling because she missed me? Or because the math wasn't working the way she expected? And that question, that's what kept my thumb off the screen. Before all that, things looked steady. From the outside, anyway. We'd been married 8 years. No kids. Not by accident. We talked about it and decided to wait. Then we kept waiting. The house was always quiet enough that you could hear the fridge cycle on from 2 rooms away. It was a big place. Stone exterior, tall windows, hardwood floors that stayed cool even in summer. The kind of house where you feel like you should lower your voice without anyone asking you to. Her family had money, old investments, smart timing, things I only half understood. There was a trust in her name, quarterly distributions that just appeared. I don't mean small ones, the kind that make financial advisors smile with both rows of teeth. I work full-time, mechanical supervisor for a regional fleet company. 30 trucks under my watch, diesel engines, brake systems, maintenance logs. My hands stayed busy. I like that. Grease under the nails made sense to me. We split expenses, technically. Mortgage, utilities, groceries. But her contributions always felt optional. Mine didn't. That wasn't her saying it outright. It was just the structure of it. She handled investments. I handled anything that required lifting, fixing, installing, replacing. If the water heater made a sound, I was already in the garage grabbing tools before she finished describing it. I didn't mind that division. I actually preferred it. I remember once, this was maybe 3 years in, she asked why I never considered starting my own business. "You're capable of more," she said. It sounded supportive. Maybe it was. But there was a pause after more. Like the word had weight. We traveled a lot. Well, she traveled a lot. I went when I could schedule time off. Italy one summer. Napa the next. There were dinners where the plates were bigger than the portions. I'd sit there with a jacket that felt slightly too fitted and listen to conversations about venture capital and board seats. I learned to nod at the right times. At one dinner party, I can still see the long glass table, candles reflected in it. She joked that she'd rescued me from a life of grease and gas stations. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. It wasn't mean. It just wasn't nothing either. I told myself she was proud of what she provided. That's not a crime. People like to feel capable. And she was capable. Sharp. Organized. She knew tax codes better than most accountants. But sometimes, when bills came in, she'd flip through them like she was reviewing paperwork for an employee. Efficient. Detached. I used to ask myself, and I mean quietly, while brushing my teeth or lying awake, does money change how someone measures respect? Maybe you've wondered that too. Not in a bitter way. Just practical. Because when you grow up watching your dad count out 20s at the kitchen table, you learn that money is loud. Even when nobody's talking, there were small things. If I picked a restaurant, she'd check the menu prices first. Not because she couldn't afford it. More like she was assessing whether it matched her standards. If I talked about upgrading my truck, she'd ask for numbers. Does that make financial sense? Which is fair. But the tone sometimes felt like approval had to be granted. I didn't notice it stacking up at first. It's funny how slow that happens. Like dust on a shelf. You don't see it until light hits at the right angle. We didn't fight often. When we did, it stayed controlled. No shouting matches. No thrown objects. Just calm sentences that landed heavy. The night she told me I crawled back, the argument started over something small. A transfer from our joint account to one of her investment accounts. She hadn't mentioned it. I saw it when balancing the monthly spreadsheet. I asked about it. That's all. She said it was temporary. Just repositioning funds. The way she said repositioning made it sound strategic, harmless. Maybe it was. But it was our joint account. I remember leaning against the counter, looking at the numbers on my phone screen. They felt thin suddenly, like the air had shifted pressure. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. She shrugged. Not dismissive exactly. Just efficient. It's just liquidity management, Mickle. Liquidity management. I almost laughed at that phrase. It sounded like something said in a boardroom, not a kitchen. And that's when I felt it. Not anger, not yet, but distance. A small gap opening. I should have said more right then. Or maybe less. I don't know. I've replayed that part a few times, and the details blur. I think I mentioned transparency. Or partnership. Something along those lines. She set her phone down slowly. That part one remember clearly. The screen lit up her face for a second before it went dark. And then she gave that tight little smile. The one that said she'd already done the math. Looking back, there was a red flag before that night. A small one. A comment she made a few months earlier. We were reviewing annual expenses and she said, "If something ever happened, I'd be fine. I've structured things that way." At the time, I nodded. Thought it was smart planning. Now I hear it differently. Because she didn't say we. She said I didn't confront that then. Maybe I didn't want to. Stability is comfortable, even when it's slightly tilted. And that kitchen, bright, clean, echoing. That's where the till became visible. When she told me I'd be back in a week. Certain. Like I'd already lost a game I didn't know we were playing. After the call started, I didn't answer right away. That wasn't pride. Not exactly. It was observation. I wanted to hear the pattern first. The motel room was dim, one lamp on near the bed. The air conditioner clicked and hummed in uneven cycles. I sat on the edge of the mattress, with my phone face up beside me. Every time it buzzed, the screen lit the ceiling in pale blue. Call, call, call. The first 10 came within 15 minutes. Then a pause. Then 5 more back-to-back, like she tried to wait and couldn't. By call 20, my stomach felt tight. Not panic. Just awareness. She didn't leave voicemails at first. That surprised me. I expected something sharp. Something cutting. Nothing. Just the ringing. Around call 32. I think it was 32. Might have been 31. A voicemail finally came through. I let it sit there for a while before pressing play. Her voice was calm. Too calm. "Hey, pick up." That was it. 7 seconds long. No please. No explanation. Just expectation. I set the phone down again and leaned back against the headboard. The paint on the wall behind me had a rough patch where someone had filled a dent and not sanded it smooth. I traced it with my finger while I thought, why 47 calls? If she believed what she said, that I'd crawl back, then why the urgency? That question stuck with me. The next morning, I went to work like nothing was wrong. Signed off on brake replacements. Approved a parts order. One of the younger guys asked if I'd changed cologne. I realized it was motel soap. Thin smell. Artificial clean. I almost told him everything right there, by the tool rack. Didn't. Around noon, my bank app sent a notification. Low balance warning on the joint account. That stopped me. I leaned against the metal workbench and opened the app. The numbers had shifted again. Another transfer out. Larger this time. Not repositioning. Draining. I stared at the screen long enough that the display dimmed. Now here's the part where I might have misjudged something. I assumed it was reactionary. Like she was securing funds because I'd left. But maybe she'd planned it earlier. I can't say for sure. The timing felt deliberate, though. Too tight. I didn't call her. Instead, I drove to the bank after work. Walked in. Sat with a loan officer I'd spoken to before about refinancing options. Her name was Carla. She had reading glasses that slid down her nose when she focused on the screen. I asked about access permissions on joint accounts. What could be moved? What required dual authorization? Carla typed quietly. The keys made this soft clicking sound that felt louder than usual in that office. Either party can transfer funds, she said, unless there are restrictions placed. Restrictions. There weren't any. I nodded like that was expected. Thanked her. Walked out with a pamphlet I didn't read. Back in the truck, I checked my personal savings. Intact. Smaller than I liked, but intact. That gave me a steady breath. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't her. It was her father. I stared at his name on the screen longer than I had the bank numbers. He never called me directly unless it was holiday coordination or logistics about family events. I let it ring. He didn't leave a voicemail. 2 minutes later, she called again. That's when something shifted from confusion to suspicion. Because if this was just a fight between husband and wife, why involve him? I sat there in the parking lot, engine off, windows cracked slightly. The late afternoon air smelled like asphalt heating up. A semi-truck idled nearby, diesel rumbling low and steady. I asked myself something then. Am I reacting to pride, or am I missing something bigger? That's not a dramatic question. It's practical. When numbers move quietly and calls multiply, you don't assume romance is the reason. You assume strategy. That night, another voicemail came in. Longer this time. Mickle, this is getting ridiculous. Call me back. We need to talk. Need. The word sounded heavier, but there was still no apology. No softening. Just urgency. I replayed the first argument in my head while staring at the motel ceiling. The transfer. The smile. The certainty. What if the week wasn't about me crawling back? What if it was about something she needed to complete before I understood what was happening? That thought sat with me longer than I liked. Trust or verify. That was the choice in front of me. And I've always been a man who checks the bolts twice before turning the engine over. But once you start checking, you have to be ready for what you find. On the fifth morning, I didn't go straight to work. I drove past the house instead. Didn't pull in. Just rolled slow along the stone wall that lined the front of the property. The gate was open. That was unusual. She kept it closed out of habit. Said it looked cleaner that way. There was a black SUV in the driveway I didn't recognize. Dark-tinted windows. Dealer plates. I kept driving. The truck's engine sounded louder than normal, like it knew I wasn't headed where I said I was. I circled the block once, which felt ridiculous, honestly, and parked half a street over where the trees cast shade across the curb. I told myself I was just observing, not spying. There's a difference. I think. Around 9, the front door opened. Her father stepped out first. Navy blazer. Phone pressed to his ear. He walked with purpose, like he always did, even on Thanksgiving. Behind him came a man I'd seen once before at a dinner party. Short hair. Thin tie. Real estate attorney, I think. Or estate planner. Something like that. They didn't look rushed. They looked organized. Her father handed the man a folder. Thick, white, rubber band around it. The kind you get from law offices. The attorney nodded, said something I couldn't hear, and got into the SUV. My mouth felt dry. I watched her father stand there a minute after the car pulled away. He looked toward the house, then toward the street. Not at me. I was far enough, but scanning. Assessing. Then he went back inside. I sat there longer than I meant to. The air in the truck grew warm. I rolled the window down another inch and caught the faint scent of cut grass from a neighbor's yard. Ordinary morning. Sprinklers ticking somewhere down the block. Nothing dramatic, which made it worse. I tried to replay recent conversations in my head. Any mention of selling, restructuring, asset movement. I came up blank at first. Then I remembered something small. About 6 months back, she'd asked if I had ever considered signing a post-nuptial agreement for clarity. I'd laughed it off. Said, we're not celebrities. She didn't push it. At least I don't remember her pushing. Though now that I think about it, she did send me an article later that week about financial boundaries in marriage. I skimmed it and forgot about it. Or thought I did. I drove to work after that and kept my head down. Tools. Engines. Paperwork. The normal rhythm steadied me. Metal makes sense. Contracts don't. At lunch, I checked the county property records website. It took a few minutes to navigate. I'm not exactly fluent with that stuff. But eventually I found our address. Ownership status. Pending transfer. My chest didn't tighten like in movies. It was slower than that. Like cold water seeping into boots. Pending transfer to a holding LLC I'd never heard of. Registered 2 days earlier. 2 days. Which would have been day 2 after I left. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Maybe it was a refinancing vehicle. Maybe it was tax strategy. Wealthy families move property around like chess pieces. But why now? And why without telling me? I scrolled further. The LLC listed her father as the managing member. Not her. Him. That's when the pattern sharpened. The transfers from the joint account. The urgency of the calls. Her father showing up with an attorney. This wasn't about missing me. It was about paperwork. I sat back in the plastic chair in the break room and listened to the vending machine hum. Someone had left a half-eaten bag of chips on the table. The fluorescent light flickered once overhead. I tried to steady my breathing. Maybe she assumed I'd sign whatever needed signing. Maybe the week wasn't about me crawling back financially. Maybe it was about me being absent long enough for certain signatures to go uncontested. That thought made my hands cold. I checked my email. Nothing from her. Nothing official. Then my phone buzzed again. This time a text. We need you to come home and discuss documents. Not I miss you. Not I'm sorry. Documents. I read it twice. And here's where I questioned myself. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe this was just routine estate planning accelerated by a fight. People with money plan differently. But the timing felt engineered. Like my leaving had triggered something already queued up. I drove back to the motel that evening slower than usual. The sunset cast that orange light across the highway signs. The kind that makes everything look warmer than it is. Inside the room, the air smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet. I sat at the small desk and opened my laptop. Pulled up the original deed to the house. Both our names were on it. Equal ownership. I ran my finger across the screen, where my name appeared. If the property transferred without my signature, it wouldn't hold. Not legally. Unless there was something filed already. Something I'd overlooked months ago. My stomach dipped at that thought. I went digging through old emails, attachments, scanned PDFs. There was a document she'd asked me to initial last year. Something about restructuring mortgage terms. I remembered signing digitally. Trusted her explanation. I opened it. Buried in the third page was a clause granting authority to restructure title in the event of temporary marital separation. Temporary, defined as more than 72 hours residing outside the primary residence. I stared at that line for a long time. 3 days. Day 4, she called 47 times. Because by then, the clock had run, and the lowest point wasn't anger. It was realizing I'd been confident in a partnership that had contingency plans I never truly read. I didn't call her that night. Didn't text. I closed the laptop slowly and just sat there at that little motel desk, listening to the ice machine outside spit out cubes every few minutes like it was keeping time for me. 3 days. 72 hours. That clause hadn't been bolded. It hadn't been hidden either. It was just there. I tried to remember signing it. I remember being in the living room. She was on the couch, laptop open, explaining refinancing benefits. Something about interest rates. Tax efficiency. I was half watching a game, half listening. She said, just initial here and here. I did. I didn't read the full attachment. That's on me. No one forced my hand. But I also didn't expect my marriage to contain contingency language, like a corporate exit plan. That part one didn't see coming. I slept maybe 3 hours. Woke up before the alarm. The room was cold because the AC had run all night. My throat felt dry. I sat on the edge of the bed and ran through numbers in my head. Equity, savings, salary. The house was worth close to $1.8 million. Maybe more now. We put in some renovations last year. Kitchen upgrades, landscaping. My name was on the deed. 50%. If the transfer finalized under that clause, the property could move into her father's LLC temporarily, which meant control shifted. Not necessarily ownership, but control. And control decides timing. I drove straight to an attorney's office after work that day. Small firm. Brick building. Nothing flashy. The waiting room smelled like old coffee and paper. The receptionist asked if I had an appointment. I didn't. She squeezed me in with a junior partner. His name was Daniel. Mid-30s. Sharp eyes. Rolled up sleeves. I laid it out plain. Marriage. Clause. Transfer pending. He read the document slowly. Twice. Tapped the desk lightly with his pen while thinking. This clause is aggressive, he said finally, but not automatically enforceable without notice. Notice. I hadn't received formal notice. Just calls. And that one text about documents. Daniel leaned back in his chair. If the transfer hasn't recorded fully, we can file an injunction to freeze it until review. Freeze it. The word steadied me. Here's where I hesitated. And I need to be honest about that. Part of me wondered if filing anything would turn this into something uglier than it needed to be. Maybe she intended to explain everything once I came home. Maybe the calls were about stopping it, not pushing it. I don't know. But then I remembered the timing. 3 days. 47 calls on day 4. If it were innocent, the calls would have come sooner. That's how it felt anyway. I asked Daniel what filing would mean for the marriage. He gave a lawyer's answer, neutral, careful. It signals seriousness. Seriousness. I nodded. My hands were resting on my knees, and I noticed a grease stain on my right thumb I hadn't scrubbed out fully. That stain felt more honest than the paperwork I'd signed last year. We drafted the motion that afternoon. Simple language. Request to halt transfer pending review of marital asset division. I read every line before signing. Every word. Driving back to the motel, I felt something settle inside me. Not victory. Not revenge. Just alignment. Like tightening a bolt that had been loose for a while. That night, she called again. Only twice this time. I let it ring once. Then I answered on the second call. Silence for half a second. Then her voice. Controlled, but thinner. Where are you? Safe. A pause. I could hear faint movement on her end. Maybe pacing. Maybe just shifting the phone. We need to discuss the property issue, she said. Not us. Not this. Property issue. I almost smiled at that. I've retained counsel, I told her. Kept my voice steady. Anything regarding the house can go through him. The silence that followed was different. Not calm. Sharp. You're overreacting, she said. This is administrative. Administrative. Then it shouldn't be a problem to pause it, I replied. I remember glancing at the motel door while we spoke. Thin wood. Weak lock. I suddenly became aware that wealth doesn't always play fair when cornered. That thought might have been paranoia. Or maybe just caution. She exhaled. Not loudly, but enough for me to hear it through the speaker. You're making this bigger than it is. Maybe I was. I'll admit that possibility. When trust bends, perception can warp. But I'd read the clause. And I'd counted the days. We ended the call without resolution. No yelling. No threats. Just colder ground between us than before. After I hung up, I sat there in that motel room and asked myself something plain. If someone plans for your absence before you leave, what does that say about the partnership? Maybe you'd answer differently. I filed the injunction the next morning. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. The filing hit the county system at 9:14 a.m. By 10:02, my phone rang. Her father. I answered this time. His voice wasn't loud. It never is. That's what makes it carry weight. Mickle, what are you doing? Protecting myself, I almost said. But I kept it simpler. Freezing an asset until I understand what's happening. A pause. Papers shuffling on his end. I could picture his office. Dark wood. Framed certificates. That heavy glass desk. You're misinterpreting the clause, he said. This is temporary restructuring. Then it can wait, I replied. Another pause. Shorter. Tighter. You're escalating unnecessarily. That word again. Escalating. Like I'd started something. I didn't draft the 72-hour clause, I said. I just read it. Silence. Then a measured inhale. We'll resolve this, he said. Not we'll talk. Not we'll explain. Resolve. The call ended there. By noon, Daniel called me. They've contacted us, he said. They're requesting an emergency meeting this afternoon. I checked the time. 12:27. My lunch break technically ended at 12:30. I looked around the shop floor. Engines open. Tools scattered. Life continuing like nothing had shifted. I told my assistant supervisor to cover for me. Didn't give details. Just said family matter. The meeting was at their attorney's office. Glass building downtown. The lobby smelled like polished stone and expensive air freshener. I arrived 5 minutes early. She was already there. First time I'd seen her since I left. She looked composed. Hair pulled back. Neutral blouse. No red eyes. No visible panic. Her father sat beside her. The attorney from the SUV was across the table. Daniel sat next to me, flipping through a printed copy of the deed. No one raised their voice. Her attorney spoke first. The intent of the clause was asset protection during instability. Instability. That instability being me leaving for 4 days? I asked. He adjusted his glasses. Temporary marital separation as defined. Defined. I felt my jaw tighten. I kept it controlled. Here's where I had a flicker of doubt. Sitting in that polished conference room, looking at contracts and statutes, I wondered if I had overcorrected. If filing that injunction had turned a bad argument into a legal standoff. Maybe I could have handled it privately. Maybe I'd gone too far. But then I looked at her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Not once. That settled it. Daniel laid out our position. Equal ownership. Lack of formal notice. Questionable enforcement of clause, without mutual acknowledgement. He spoke calmly, methodically. Her father leaned forward at one point. This is about protecting legacy assets, he said. Legacy. I couldn't stop myself. And I'm what? A temporary liability. No one answered that directly. The room felt smaller suddenly. Air thicker. Her attorney suggested mediation. Suggested that if I agreed to certain terms, temporary surrender of decision-making authority over the property, the injunction could be withdrawn. Temporary. Again, I asked one question. If I hadn't filed, would this transfer have completed without my signature? Silence. A glance between her father and the attorney. That would depend on interpretation, the attorney said. There it was. Interpretation. Meaning yes. I leaned back in the chair and felt the weight of it land fully. This hadn't been about cooling off. It hadn't been about pride. It had been about moving pieces while I was out of the house long enough to qualify as temporarily separated. And she'd given me a week. 72 hours. I looked at her finally. You knew. I said quietly. Her lips pressed thin. Not a smile. Not an apology. Just tension. I was protecting myself, she said. From what? Me. I almost asked it. Didn't. The meeting ended without agreement. The injunction stayed in place. The transfer paused. Outside the building, the air felt colder than it had that morning. Traffic noise echoed between the buildings. She stepped out a few seconds after me. For what it's worth, she said, not looking directly at me. You were supposed to come back. There it was. The assumption. I nodded once. That was the calculation. She didn't deny it. We stood there longer than comfortable. People walked past us, unaware of anything happening beyond their own errands. I didn't think you'd check, she added quietly. That sentence did more than the clause ever could. I got in my truck and drove away without another word. No victory. Just clarity. The injunction held. That's the practical part. The county recorded it, the transfer stalled, and the LLC never fully took control of the property. On paper, nothing changed. In reality, everything did. I didn't move back into the house. Not that week. Not the week after. I extended the motel stay first, then found a short-term rental closer to work. Small place. 2 bedrooms. Thin walls. The neighbor's dog barked every morning at 6:10 sharp. I liked that it wasn't quiet. The house we shared had always been quiet, in a polished way. This place had noise. Pipes knocking. Footsteps upstairs. Someone frying onions down the hall around dinner time. It felt lived in. Imperfect. She stopped calling daily after the meeting. Messages shifted tone. Less urgency. More logistics. We should discuss next steps. Let's be adults about this. My attorney suggests. No, I miss you. Maybe that sounds petty to notice. But you notice what's missing as much as what's present. About 3 weeks in, we met with a mediator. Neutral office. Beige walls. A box of tissues in the center of the table that no one touched. The conversation stayed technical. Asset division. Property valuation. Terms. At one point, the mediator asked if reconciliation was being considered. She looked at me. I looked at her. I realized I didn't know the answer. That surprised me. I expected anger. Or certainty. Instead, there was just distance. Like standing on opposite sides of a wide parking lot. Both aware of each other, neither moving. I'll be honest, there were nights in that rental where I replayed everything and wondered if I'd overreacted. If the clause was just aggressive estate planning, and I'd interpreted it as betrayal because my pride was bruised. But then I'd remember her words outside the building. I didn't think you'd check. That wasn't misunderstanding. That was assumption. The financial side moved steadily. Appraisals done. Account balances documented. Lawyers sending emails back and forth with phrases like amicable resolution and mutual benefit. There's nothing emotional about spreadsheets. They just total things up. One afternoon, I drove past the old house again. Not intentionally. Took a wrong turn, or maybe not wrong. Hard to say. The gate was closed this time. Landscaping freshly trimmed. Same as always. From the street, nothing looked broken. I sat there a moment longer than I should have. The stone exterior still looked solid. The upstairs window of our bedroom caught the light, just right. I could picture the bed made tight, the jewelry tray lined up. I tried to remember the last ordinary night we had before all this. Not the argument. Just a regular Tuesday. Dinner. Dishes. TV on low. The details blur. I think we ordered takeout. Or maybe I grilled chicken. No, that was a different week. See, that's the strange part. Big moments stay sharp. Normal ones fade first. I drove away before anyone noticed the truck. A month later, we signed preliminary separation paperwork. Not final divorce, just formal acknowledgement that we were living apart and dividing assets, pending full settlement. She kept the house. I received a buyout for my equity. Fair market value. Clean numbers. Daniel asked if I was satisfied with the settlement. Satisfied isn't the word. It was equitable. That's the legal term. When the funds hit my account, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Like something that had been leaning finally stood upright. Would I handle it differently now? Maybe I would have read every document more carefully from the start. That's obvious. But beyond paperwork, I don't know. If I hadn't filed that injunction, the house might have shifted quietly into a structure where my leverage thinned out over time. Maybe she would have reversed it later. Maybe not. I can't live in those maybes. We met once more in person before final filings. Coffee shop. Neutral ground. She looked tired that day. Not angry. Just worn. I didn't expect it to go this way, she said. Neither did I. But I also didn't expect my absence to activate contingency plans. We sat there for about 20 minutes. Talked logistics. No raised voices. No dramatic exits. When we stood to leave, there was a moment where it felt like one of us should say something bigger. Something meaningful. Neither did. Sometimes silence says enough. Life didn't collapse. That's important to say. I kept my job. Paid my bills. Rented a smaller place. Bought a used couch that smelled faintly like someone else's laundry detergent. Simple. Different. And steadier than I expected. I learned something about contracts. But more than that, I learned something about assumptions. Both hers. And mine. It's been a little over a year now. The divorce finalized 6 months after that coffee meeting. Clean paperwork. No courtroom drama. Just signatures and notarized stamps. I kept the truck. She kept the house. The equity check went into a modest investment account and a down payment on a smaller place of my own. 2 bedrooms. Brick exterior. The porch light flickers when it's cold. I keep meaning to replace it. The first night I slept there, the house made settling noises, wood adjusting, pipes shifting. I lay there listening to it like you'd listen to breathing. It felt honest. Nothing polished about it. If something creaks, you know why. I read every document now. Even the fine print on phone contracts. Takes longer. I don't mind. People at work eventually found out. Word travels. Nobody pried much. A couple guys asked if I was okay. I told them the truth. Yeah, I'm steady. That seemed to satisfy them. I don't hate her. That surprises some people when they hear the story. There's no anger left in it. What happened wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet, calculated, structured, and that's the part that changed me. I used to think love meant assuming good intent every time. Signing where you're told because you trust the person handing you the pen. I'm not sure that's wisdom anymore. Trust isn't blindness. It's verification without hostility. I missed that distinction. Sometimes I replay the night. She said I'd crawl back. I can still see the kitchen lights reflecting off the marble. Still smell that lemon cleaner. If I close my eyes, I can almost hear the refrigerator humming behind her words. But here's something I don't think about much anymore. The 47 calls. At first, that number felt like proof she needed me. Then it felt like proof she needed something signed. Now it just feels like a moment when a calculation didn't land the way she expected. That's all. People have asked if I felt embarrassed. Walking away from money like that. From comfort. From the easy path. Maybe for a day or two. But here's what I noticed. The air in my smaller house feels lighter. The rooms aren't echoing. When I set my boots by the door, they leave faint scuffs on the floor. I don't rush to wipe them away. Life shows up, and that's okay. I did question myself at times, whether filing that injunction was pride disguised as principle, whether I could have handled it quietly and saved the marriage. Maybe. I can't prove otherwise. But I know this. If someone builds a safety net for themselves that activates when you step outside for 72 hours, that's not a partnership built on shared ground. That's parallel planning. And parallel lives eventually drift. So here's the question I've been sitting with, and I'll leave it with you. If someone assumes you'll come crawling back before you even leave, what does that say about how they value your spine? There's no single right answer. Some people would have stayed and negotiated. Some would have ignored the clause and trusted intent. I chose to check, and once I checked, I couldn't unsee it. These days, my life is quieter in a different way. Not the polished quiet of high ceilings and marble floors. More like the steady quiet of a house that's paid for with attention. When something breaks, I fix it. When something doesn't feel right, I look closer. That's not bitterness. That's maintenance. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Uncle Mickle's voice travels. Respect isn't measured by money. It's measured by what survives when money moves.